I have 27 pages of notes, all telling me about new novels coming in the second half of 2025, and one that's coming in 2026 from a particularly exciting author. 61 books worth, plus or minus however many I added in or forgot to count when I was adding them all up. 21 of them are books in translation. Now, if you're a stickler for punishment, you can go get yourself a pen and paper and write down all the titles you're interested in, but I'm going to tell you now, I'm putting the list of books in the description for you. I'm going to go through the books in the order that they are being released. Please take the dates that I'm telling you with a grain of salt. Release dates can move about. North American, European and Australian release dates can often differ, sometimes by quite a lot, sometimes by just a little bit, so, grain of salt. So I'm going to start with some books released earlier this month. I'm definitely being considerate doing that, and it's definitely not that I'm 3.5 weeks late making this video. On the 10th of July is Death and the Gardener by Georgi Gospodinov, translated from Bulgarian by Angela Rodel. A man sits by his father's bedside and watches him die. He watches as his past begins to crack, leaving him buried in all its afternoons, the quietly collapsing afternoons of childhood, because the end of our fathers is the end of a world. Former winner of the Booker International Prize there with a new book. Dead Lucky by Connor Hutchinson. Think of being on your deathbed and thinking about all of them nights where you just said no, just because you were a little bit short of money. That's not how I want to live. Jamie Fletcher loves his job as an embalmer at a busy funeral home in Openshaw, Manchester, but he's hiding a big secret. His gambling addiction has left him in eye-watering debt. When his girlfriend Rebecca piles on pressure to buy their first home together, he knows he has to do something to cover his tracks, and fast. So Jamie does what he knows best. He walks up to the bookies and places the biggest bet of his life. Tonight could be the night that changes everything. You never know. On July 17th, Seascraper by Benjamin Wood was released. Tom lives a slow, deliberate life with his mother in Longferry, working his grandfather's trade as a shanker. His heart is in his music, but these ambitions seem far away from the dreary town around him. Instead, he rises early to take his horse and cart to the grey, gloomy beaches and scrapes for shrimps, spending the rest of his time selling the wares, looking after his ma, and daydreaming about Joan Wraith down the street. When a striking visitor turns up, an American who oozes glamour, Tom thinks it's a good deal. Show him around the coast in exchange for enough money to raise an eyebrow at the bank. Maybe enough to broaden the narrow horizon he's begun to strain against. Mr. Hutchinson says he's in the movie business, but how much of what he says is Hollywood magic? Seascraper is a memorizing portrait of a young man confined by his class and the ghost of his family's past, dreaming of artistic fulfillment. It confirms Benjamin Wood as an exceptional talent in British literature. People Have No Charisma by Jente Posthuma, translated from Dutch by Sarah Timmer Harvey. An unnamed narrator grows up overshadowed by her unconventional mother, ex-Jehovah Witness and former television star with an inferiority complex. Her father is head of a psychiatric unit, whose only form of parenting is to offer his daughter the same life advice he dispenses to his patients. Reserved and somewhat aloof, he chooses not to intervene when his wife's obsession about charisma, calorie counting, and turning their daughter into a child prodigy. Her daughter strives to meet her mother's expectation and bond with her father while secretly worrying she lacks the drive or charisma to do anything significant with her life. When her mother is diagnosed with terminal cancer, she begins to address their generational trauma, forge a new relationship with her father, and discover life on her terms. In 12 chapters, each reflecting a different phase of life, Posthuma expertly dissects a fraught family history, exposing the absurdity that often lies at the heart of life's most poignant and challenging moments. Coming on the 31st of July, Bloody Awful in Different Ways by Andrev, Walden, translated from Swedish by Ian Giles. Christmas. 1983. In the aftermath of yet another furious argument, 7-year-old Andrev's mother lets him in on a secret. His father is, in fact, not his father. So begins a new life of childhood, in which fathers come and go, arriving in red Volvos and sweeping his mother off her feet. Fathers can be magicians or murderers, artists or canoe enthusiasts, and, like growing pains or the weather, they appear uninvited and leave without warning. Fathers are drawn to his mother like a moth to flame, but even she can't control how they behave. Coming on the 5th of August is Indian Country by Shobha Rao, a couple from India, so different from generations of white colonialists who came before them, moved to Montana only to discover how brutal and unforgiving hubris can be. Genevieve and Sagar were never meant to end up married. Genevieve is a wonderfully independent young modern Indian woman. She works for an organisation in India that helps street children, often lost to the world of human trafficking. Sagar is a trained hydraulic engineer, an expert in dam construction. He is the least favourite son, his parents never able to forgive him for an unspeakable act in the past. Sagar seeks refuge in his daydream of one day finding hidden treasures in the fabled Indian river, the Ganges. Yet the two are forced together into an arranged marriage which neither of them wants. Even worse, Sagar has already accepted a job in America, in a strange place called Montana, where he will be in charge of distilling a dam. Montana upends all their expectations. Sagar's white colleagues do not welcome him with open arms, and Genevieve finds herself unable to forgive her sister who stayed behind in India, whose betrayal led her to this marriage in a strange place. When a colleague of Sagar is found drowned, Sagar is the obvious scapegoat. Is this death one in a long history of people of colour paying the price for white man's arrogance and expansionism? Just like the Ganga River dominates Sagar's dreams, throughout the novel runs short historic stories of settlers who conquered both the West and India, who formed a foundation upon which Sagar and Genevieve stand. A bold, ambitious, stunningly beautiful yet brutal novel about colonialism and the ripening ramifications still felt today. Indian Country is a tour de force modern day classic. I will read anything Shobha Rao writes after Girls Burn Bright. Also coming on the 5th of August is Ghost Wedding by David Park. George Allenby is still wrestling with his expectations as an officer during the First World War when he is sent by his employers to construct a lake at the Manor House, home of the newly rich Remington family. The construction process raises traumatic memories that he isn't yet prepared to face. Solace emerges in the unlikely form of Cora, a maid in the grand home. Almost a century later, Alex and Ali are planning their wedding in the grounds of the manor house. But like Allenby before him, Alex is haunted by a secret that threatens to destroy the life he has built. As the day of the wedding approaches, he must decide whether to tell Ali about the evening he will always regret. In a masterful portrait of love and betrayal, David Park reveals the many ways the past seeps into the destructive, formidable, but also hopeful in the many moments of fragile beauty that remains. People Like Us by Jason Mott. People Like Us is Jason Mott's electric new novel. It's not a memoir, yet it has a deeply personal connection to Jason's life. And while rooted in reality, it exposes the daydream experience that pulls a reader in and doesn't let go. From the ability to time travel to sightings of sea monsters and peacocks, and feelings of love and memories so real that they hurt. In People Like Us, two black riders are trying to find peace and belonging in a world that is riven with gun violence. One is on a global book tour after a big prize win. The other is set to give a speech at a school that has suffered a shooting. And as their two storylines merge, truth and antics abound in equal measures. Characters drink booze out of an award trophy. Menace lurks in the shadows. Tiny French cars putter around the countryside. Handguns seem to hover in the air. And dreams endure against all odds. People Like Us is wickedly funny and achingly sad all at once. It is an utter triumph, bursting with larger-than-life characters who deliver a very real take on our world. The book contains characters experience deep loss and longing. It is also buoyed by righteous humour and characters who share the deepest love. It is the newest creation of a writer whose work amazes, delivers something utterly new yet instantly recognisable as a Jason Mott novel. Finishing this novel will leave you absolutely breathless, and at the same time utterly filled with joy for life, changed forever by characters who are people like us. Jason Mott's last novel won the National Book Awards in the US. And I've said it before, Jason Mott for me is very similar to Percival Everett, but is an author I frankly prefer to Percival Everett usually. So take that any way you wish. Open Wide by Jessica Gross. A provocative novel about intimacy, love and consent, following an increasingly obvious radio host who tests boundaries she didn't know exist. Olive is desperate to get close to Theo. Really, really close. She always struggles to connect with people, and now she's in her 30s, single, and so frustrated by relationships that she secretly records her conversations, hoping to decipher social clues and find a way to be less alone. Then Theo turns up for a shift at the same food pantry where she volunteers. He's a surgeon fascinated by human organs, a former soccer player, and possibly as weird as Olive. For the first time, somebody seems to crave and understand her. Every recording Olive makes of Theo is a balm, which just makes her more afraid of losing him. The only solution seems to be to bind him to her forever. Luckily, the gap between Theo's front teeth is just wide enough for something or someone to slip inside. The Hounding by Xenobe Purvis. Many stories are told about the 5 Mansfield sisters. They are haughty, thinking themselves better than their neighbours, in the picturesque village of Little Nettlebed. They have taken the death of their grandmother hard. They are liars, troublemakers, untamed and dangerous. Accounts of their behaviour differ, but the villagers all agree that the girls are odd. One long summer, a heatwave descends, bloated sea creatures wash up along the parched riverbed, animals grow frenzied, ravens gather on the roof of those about to die. As the stifling heat gripped the village, so does a strange rumour. The Mansfield sisters have been seen transforming into a pack of dogs. With the witch trials only a recent memory, hysteria sets in. Slowly but surely the villagers become convinced that something strange is taking root in Little Nettlebed, as when a bark finally leads to a bite, the sisters will be the ones to pay for it. On the 7th of August comes This Kind of Trouble by Tochi Eze, 2005. In Atlanta, Benjamin, a white passing man of Nigerian heritage, is wondering what his life has been made up of. Broken relationships, attempts to forge an identity from other memories. In Lagos, Margaret, a Nigerian single mother, is trying to decipher and finally destroy the mental malaise that has troubled her for so long, for as long as she can remember, by winding her way through a complex family history. Though they are no longer the 20-somethings they once were when they met, and the 40 years that have passed since they last saw one another might suggest that they are strangers. There is a deep and unsettled history that have bound them together since long before they were born. 1905. A well-respected chief in Ulamio village, Nigeria. Okolo is always following tradition. Then 3 of the young village women, including his sister, who follow the white man's god, are shrouded in scandal, and Okolo is forced to choose which path to take, that of least resistance, embracing the way of the white man to save his village and his sister's pride, or the other, preserving the ways that have sustained generations. But at what cost? A beautifully crafted multi-generational story of family history and identity. This Kind of Trouble is a powerful debut that asks what makes up a life and how, when it's broken, we might put it back together. Roadkill by Amil, translated from Korean by Archana Madhavan. Roadkill is for the next generation of readers of speculative fiction who love to be transported to different worlds, but also crave fresh perspectives, featuring dystopian wastelands, shamans, self-driving cars, tusked water deer, and a divine sea serpent. These 6 stylistically different stories form a sweeping collection that explores contemporary subjects such as the climate crisis, Korean idol culture, and techno-capitalism through the lives of young women, their friendships and desires for self-expression. And Notre Dame is Burning by Miriam Robinson. I find myself wondering what would have happened if I had been more clear, if our relationship had not begun with one tiny untruth. Time has flattened for Esther. Her storybook marriage begins and ends in the shadow of Notre Dame's cathedral, sifting through the ashes of their years together, a time now collapsed by grief. She finds a mismatched mountain lion, a Paris bookshop, bad dancing, bad faith, marshland, prairieland, miscarriage, motherhoods, bagels, Eve. In order to understand the new story, Esther seeks help. From generations of women, from a book about evolution, from a friendly philanthropist/scientist with a solid grasp on the space-time continuum. Mostly, though, she writes fragments, notes, letters, tracing a fine line between a story that soothes and one that suffocates, confronting the impossibility of communicating anything in the right way, at the right moment. To her daughter, Esther writes and rewrites until time slows and takes shape again. Told with dry wit and a startling ferocity, and Notre Dame is Burning heralds an urgent new voice in literary fiction. Lowest Common Denominator by Pirkko Saisio, translated from Finnish by Maya Spangenberg. Grandpa says everybody should leave me alone. If I want to be a boy, then I'm a boy. Simple as that. Writing in the wake of her father's death, the narrator of this auto-fiction novel transports us to the 1950s Finland of her youth, where she navigates life as an only child of communists' parents. Convinced she will grow up to become a man, a young Pirkko keeps trying and failing to meet the expectations of the adults around her. With wit and style, Saisio captures the heart-warming intensity of childhood feeling, merging fever dreams with sensory-laden memories of each formative experience. With the big bad wolf, a bikini-clad circus announcer, and Jesus Christ himself, drives her further and further from her families and others, struggling to understand her place in the world around her, in its language that she discovers a refuge and a way to be seen at last. An unforgettable story of transformation. Lowest Common Denominator is the first volume in a trilogy that has been celebrated in Finland as the best work of the last century. That sounds very much like a book about being trans, and I just want to say I've read the pronouns as they appear in the description, even though it sounds to me like they're misgendering the protagonist. I am trusting that I don't understand something and that the description got it right, but I just want to flag that. On the 12th of August comes Ruins by Amy Taylor, a simmering, provocative novel about a couple whose affair with a young Greek woman over the course of the summer in Athens threatens to crack their relationship wide open. At a crossroads in their life, a couple arrives in Greece to house sit for a friend. Emma is searching for a meaningful next step beyond work or motherhood, and Julian is struggling to come to terms with the failure of his academic career. Their vision for the future seems to be pulling them in different directions, and they hope that this summer away will help them mend their frayed connection. But Emma and Julian's plans take an unexpected turn when they meet Lena, an enigmatic young Greek woman who presents an opportunity for them to explore their relationships in uncharted and explicitly risky ways. However, as sultry nights turn into oppressive days, Emma and Julian become far more entangled in Lena's life than they'd bargained for. Engaged in a struggle for control, the three of them are suddenly faced with consequences far greater and far more explosive than they could have predicted. Voyeuristic and thrilling, Ruins delivers the drama of a modern Greek tragedy as it exposes the tensions between privilege, power, desires, and intimacy. All this from the author of Search History. That is going to be one that you're either very interested in or you want to avoid. But I'm sure you know which camp you're in. The Island of Last Things by Emma Slowly. Camille has always preferred animals to people. The wild has nearly disappeared, but as a zookeeper at the last zoo in the world on Alcatraz Island, she spends her days caring for playful chimpanzees, gentle tree frogs, and a restless jaguar. Outside, resistance groups and brutal cartels fight to shape the world's future, but Camille is safe within her routines, that is, until a new zookeeper, Sailor, arrives from Paris. From their first meeting, Camille is drawn to Sailor, who seems to see something in Camille that no one has before. They bond over their shared passion and dream up ways to improve their lives. When Sailor whispers the story of an idealistic secret sanctuary where wild animals roam free, Camille begins to imagine a new kind of life with Sailor by her side. Sailor knows all too well the dangers beyond Alcatraz, but as she increasingly rubs up against the rigid rules at the zoo, she hatches a reckless plan to smuggle one of the most prized animals off the island to freedom, and invites Camille to join her. The consequences, if they fail, would be catastrophic, and Sailor's contacts at the sanctuary go dark just as the threat from the cartels grows more extreme. Camille must decide if she's ready to risk everything for the promise of a better world. Propulsive and fiercely hopeful, with a heart-stopping final twist, The Island of Last Things is an elegy for a disappearing world and a gorgeous vision for the future. She Used to Be Nice by Alexia Lafata. A young woman must confront her abuser in this gripping debut novel, sure to captivate fans of Sweet Bitter and My Year of Rest and Relaxation. One night in college changes the course of Avery's entire life. Her rapist took everything from her, including the trust of her friends and longtime boyfriend, who were convinced she cheated. A year later, she still can't bear to tell the truth about what happens and risk her friendship with Morgan, the only friend she has left. Instead, Avery finds her way under a man or into a bottle just to convince herself that she has power over her feelings and her autonomy, that her body still belongs to her. That is, until she meets Pete, a man so kind and good that he awakens a part of Avery that makes her want to try something new. But somehow Avery's rapist has resurfaced in her life as the best man in Morgan's wedding, and as maid of honour there is no way Avery can avoid him. His mere presence grates at Avery's already raw emotional state, and she begins to drive away the final few who care about her, including Pete. As the wedding nears, Avery must decide whether to finally let her walls down and tell her truth, or risk spiralling towards a darkness she may never be able to recover from. Readers who seek out thought-provoking, character-driven stories and book club novels with strong discussion themes will love She Used to Be Nice. What a provocative title for that subject matter too. The 14th of August sees I Want Everything by Dominika Amarina. You know this, of course, but years and years ago, acclaimed Australian author Brenda Shales went missing after two explosive, controversial books that would shape the literary canon of the country for decades to come, and that terrible legal scandal about plagiarism, of course. She was simply gone. That was right up until a frustrated young writer sees an elderly woman swimming at his local pool in Melbourne. She looks familiar, very familiar in fact. No, it couldn't be. Stunned, he returns home to confirm the impossible truth. It's Brenda Shales, now in her old age and stranded in a retirement home. He is determined to pursue her, to discover what has happened to her all those years ago, and to possibly fulfill his dream of literary stardom through a tell-all biography. But when he finds her, a case of mistaken identity and Brenda's own terrible secrets begin to derail his ambition and ultimately his entire life. Opt Out by Carolina Zetterwall, translated from Swedish by Deborah Bragan Turner. Everything will be fine. That is what Mary and John promise when they tell their 2 children that they are getting divorced. But the separation becomes wildly different from what they have both imagined. John is quickly scooped up by a new woman, while Mary is forced to realise that an adult woman without a partner is not an uncomplicated matter in the eyes of society. While John moves on with both the children's trust and his personal finances intact, Mary, who has never spent her life living for the approval of others, must reevaluate herself, her choices, and her life. Opt Out is a searing reckoning with the limitations of marriage and gender roles, and an examination of the image of the good mother, smart, intimate, and emotionally astute. It is a story about family and love, for better or for worse, and the difficulties of breaking away from the constraints of one's life in pursuit of another. On the 15th of August comes Mistress Kaharu by Nobuo Toshihara, translated from Japanese by Kalahu Alami. Akira, a meticulous editor at a major publishing house in Tokyo, harbours a secret. He lives with Kaharu, a Hungarian-made love doll. Each night he speaks to her and finds a long-sought solace in her presence, a comfort he cannot attain, even in the arms of real women in his life. But when Kyoko, an intelligent subtitle translator, enters his life, everything changes. A single confession to Kaharu about his attraction to Kyoko sets off a chain of disturbing events that spiral into the unexpected. The Japanese certainly love their weird speculative novels, and I am all here for them. On the 19th of August comes Ruth by Kate Riley. In this memorising and profound novel, the arc of a woman's life in a devout insular community challenges our deepest assumptions about what infuses life with meaning. Ruth is raised in a snow globe of Christian communism, a world without private property, television, or tolerance for idle question. Every morning she braids her hair and wears the same costume, sings the same breakfast song in a family room identical to each other's family room in the community. Every one of these moments is meant to be a prayer, but to Ruth, they remain puzzles. Her life is seen in glimpses through childhood, marriage, and motherhood, as she tries to manage her own perilous curiosity in a community built on holy mystery. Is she happy? Might this in fact be happiness? Ruth immerses us in an experience that challenges our most fervent beliefs. Sweeteners by Marissa Higgins. From the author of A Good Happy Girl, a lesbian screwball comedy following 2 exes who turn to online dating after their dramatic split, only to end up seeing the same woman. In Sweeteners, recently separated wives, both named Rebecca, can't seem to disentangle their lives. Lonely and desperate, Rebecca is scraping by as a part-time cashier at an organic grocery store. Despite having less than $10 in her bank account, she lists herself as a sugar mama on a lesbian hookup app. Enter Charlotte, a charismatic artist who, unbeknownst to Rebecca, is also dating her wife. Meanwhile, the other Rebecca, a newly sober doctoral student, has renewed her efforts to foster a child. The catch, because the Rebeccas are still legally married, she needs her wife to attend parenting classes with her as part of the approval process. Neither of them asks whether this means they're getting back together, but the idea alone sends Charlotte into a tailspin as Charlotte navigates her desire for each Rebecca, or her desire for attention. Her world becomes more and more Gumby-like and surreal. It doesn't help that she's been wearing a fake pregnancy belly to all of her dates. And only one of the Rebeccas knows it isn't real. Sumptuous, sticky, and slightly absurd, Sweeteners brings together three women fixated on the fantasy of motherhood and trying to figure out what kind of mother, partner, or sugar mama they want to be. Dominion by Addie E. Chickener. The sins of her favourite son rock a small Mississippi town in this taut Southern family drama. Reverend Saber Winfrey, shepherd of the Seven Seals Baptist Church, believes in God, his own privilege, and enterprise. Besides the barbershop and radio station he owns, he has an iron hand on every aspect of Dominion, Mississippi society. He and his wife Priscilla have 5 boys. The youngest, Emmanuel, is called Wonder Boy. No one sings prettier, runs as fast, or turns as many heads. After a surprising encounter with a stranger, Wonder Boy finds himself confronted by questions he never imagined, and his response will send shockwaves through the entire community. Told from the point of view of the women who love these two men, Dominion illustrates how we enable the everyday violence and casual sins of the patriarchy. We Computers by Hamed Ismailov, translated from Uzbek by Shelley Fairweather Vega. In the late 1980s, French poet and psychologist John Peirce finds himself in possession of one of the most promising inventions of the century, a computer. Enchanted by snippets of Persian poetry, he learns from his Uzbek translation partner Abdul Hamid Ismail. John Peirce builds a computer program capable of both analysing and generating literature. But beyond the text on the screen, there are entire worlds of history, philosophy, and maybe even of love in the stories and people he and AI conjure. Hamid Ismailov brings together his work as a poet, translator, and student of literature of both East and West to craft a postmodern ode to poetry across centuries and continents. Crossing cursed poets with beloved Sufi classics, blending absurdist dreams of the famed Persian poet Hafez, moving from careful mathematic calculations to lyrical narratives. Ismailov invents an ingenious transnational poetics of love and longing for the digital age. Situated at the crossroads of a multilingual world and meditated by the unrealistic sensibilities of digital intelligence, this book is a dazzling celebration of how poetry resonates across time and space. That sounds unique and different. I'm not sure if that's a good or bad thing, but it's definitely something I'd be interested to find out. On the 21st of August comes Disconnected by Beatrice Serrano, translated from Spanish by Myra Faye Latham. Marissa is in her 30s and a creative strategist at an advertising agency in Madrid. Her job is about selling things people don't need to people who don't want them, and she can see right through it to the late-stage capitalist mess we are in. But what to do with this knowledge, other than hide the basement of the Prado, arm herself with tranquilizers and irony, name her spiraling anxiety Berto after her failed lover, and wonder whether everyone else cries when their alarm wakes them up in the morning. Over the course of one hot summer, Marissa moves between her apartment terrace, her office, and her company's retreat in the mountains as the clock ticks down towards a horrifying team-building weekend. Life can't go on like this, can it? Sympathy Towers Tokyo by Ree Quadran, translated from Japanese by Jesse Kirkwood. Welcome to the Japan of tomorrow. Here, the practice of radical sympathy towards criminals has become the norm, and a grand skyscraper in the heart of Tokyo is planned to house wrongdoers in compassionate comfort. Sympathy Towers, Tokyo. Acclaimed architect Sarah Machida has been tasked with designing the city's new centrepiece, but is riveted by doubt, haunted by the terrible crimes she experienced as a young girl. She wonders if she might inherently disagree with the values of the project, which should be the pinnacle of her career. As Sarah grapples with these conflicting emotions, her relationship with her gorgeous and much younger boyfriend grows increasingly strained. In search of solace, in need of creative inspiration, Sarah turns to the knowing world of an AI chatbot. Awarded Japan's highest literary prize, Sympathy Towers, Tokyo is an extraordinary novel from one of the most exciting new voices in world literature. Partly inspired by a conversation with an artificial intelligence, it offers an extraordinary defense of the powers of language written by humans, a touching exploration of the imaginative impulse, and an often hilarious send-up of our modern world's unrelenting conformity. Oh, I do like a send-up of this conformity we have. One of the saddest things, I think, is how similar different countries are becoming. On the 26th of August is We Love to Run by Stephanie Reentz, a fearless debut novel about a woman's cross-country team and how far girls will push themselves to control their bodies, friendships and futures. We love running because it was who we were, who we'd been in high school and who we'd hoped to be in the future we couldn't yet imagine. Strong and fast, fast and strong. At Frost, a small liberal arts college in Massachusetts, the runners on a women's cross-country team have their sights set on the 1992 New England Division III Championships and will push themselves through every punishing workout and skipped meal to achieve their goal. But Kirsten, the team's star, is hiding a secret about what happened over the summer, and her unpredictable behaviour jeopardizes the girls' chance to win. Team captain Danielle is convinced she can restore Kirsten's confidence, even if it means burying her own past. As the final meet approaches, Kirsten, Danielle and the rest of the girls must transcend their individual circumstances to run the race as a team. Told from the perspective of the 6 fastest team members, We Love to Run deftly illuminates the impossible standards young women set for themselves in spite of their own powerlessness. With startling honesty and bounding empathy, Stephanie Reentz reveals how girls, even those pitted against each other, find ways to love and defend one another. The book cover has really upset me. Told from the point of view of 6 team members. So why does the cover have 7? Whoever is publishing this book needs to learn how to count. Just the fingers on their hands. That's all. Not like big numbers. Monaghan by Timothy O'Grady. Moving from West Belfast and County Monaghan to the streets of San Francisco, Timothy O'Grady's exhilarating new novel is an epic portrait of art and war, authenticity and selling out, told through the fates of 3 men. Rowan, Monaghan native and teller of this tale, is a celebrated theorist of postmodern architecture in New York. Paul, single son of a hotel maid in Indiana, turns his mathematical gifts into a multi-million-dollar career as an investment banker. And the mysterious Ryan, who grew up as a boy in besieged West Belfast and was swept into the war against the British and lived a decade of extremes and escalating violence as a sniper. Through him, the war in Ireland and its psychic legacy are brought into close focus in a way rarely seen in contemporary fiction. Their lives merge and conflict, rise and fall, as one man becomes the undoing of the next. Hauntingly beautiful, lyrical and profound, this is a novel about what happens when you cannot escape your past. On the 28th of August comes Helm by Sarah Hall. Helm is a ferocious, mischievous wind, a subject of folklore and awe who has blasted the sublime landscape of the Eden Valley since the very dawn of time. Told through the stories of those who's obsessed over this phenomenon, Helm's extraordinary history is formed. The Neolithic tribe who tried to placate Helm. The Dark Age wizard priest who wanted to banish Helm. The Victorian steam engine who attempted to capture Helm. And the farmer's daughter who loved Helm. But now Dr. Selma Sutar, surrounded by an infinite clouds and memorizing instruments in her observation hut, fears human pollution is killing Helm. Rich, wild and vital, Helm is the story of a unique life force, of a relationship between nature and people, neither of whom can weather life without the other. Blood Book by Kim de la Horizon, translated from German by Jamie Lee Sells. An unnamed protagonist, prompted by their grandmother's slide into dementia to investigate their family's history. The more their grandmother forgets, the more the narrator tries to find out what is what in their childhood, and to figure out what has prompted them to feel so alienated from their own body. Why is their grandmother struggling to differentiate between herself and her sister, who died as a child? And what happened to their great auntie, who disappeared when she was young? But tracking down the answers to these questions proves difficult in a family steeped in secrecy. Blood Book is published in the US as See Mother Swallow Tongues. On the 1st of September comes All Kidding Aside by Jean-Christophe Renel, translated from French by Neil Smith. Louis, a young queer man, living in Montreal's East End with his rap-obsessed schizophrenic brother and his terminally ill father. Louis dreams of becoming a stand-up comedian. Delivered in short, addictive chapters, All Kidding Aside deftly juggles the themes of love, class and grief with poetic mockery. On the 4th of September comes Sugartown by Cara Maxwell. Saoirse's life has lost what little direction it once had. Forced to move back in with her mother after a bad breakup, she finds herself living alongside 3 young sisters she barely knows. Worse still, the brittle, distant woman who raised her is gone, replaced by a doting mother who showers her younger child with affection. Saoirse thought she'd escaped this whirlwind of family drama when she moved to London. Now she's not so sure. She throws herself into a new relationship, fun, rekindles childhood friendships, mostly fun, and reacquaints herself with the pubs and clubs that were the backdrop to her teenage years. Somehow less fun than it once was. It takes a chance encounter to force Saoirse to face up to all the questions she's been running away from, not least, what does it mean to return home to a place that you barely recognise? The Two Roberts by Damien Barr. He will stay like this forever. Robert's arm draped around him. They will be forever 20. Scotland, 1933. Bobby McBride is on his way. After years grafting at Lee's boot factory, he's off to Glasgow School of Arts, to his future. On his first day, he meets another Robert, a quiet man with loose, dark curls, and never leaves his side. Together they will spend every penny and every minute devouring Glasgow, its botanic garden, its markets, a whole hidden city, all the while loving each other behind closed doors. With the world on the brink of war, their unrivaled talents will take them to Paris, Rome, London. They will become stars as the bombs fall, hosting wild parties with the likes of Lucian Freud, Francis Bacon and Elizabeth Smart. But the brightest stars burn fastest. On the 9th of September comes Capitalists Must Starve by Park Seol-young, translated from Korean by Anton Her. Set against the backdrop of Japan-occupied Korea, Capitalist Must Starve follows a sharp-tongued, big-hearted heroine who dares to love, rebel, and carve out space for working-class women in a world determined to silence them. This feminist historical novel balances raw grit with unexpected tenderness and a defiant streak of dark humour, a stirring portrait of resistance, fierce, funny, and full of fight. I love that title. I really want to read this book, even though it is translated by one of my least favourite translators. All That Dies in April. All That Dies in April by Mariana Trevicchio, translated from Argentinian by Samantha Schnee and Will Morningstar. By the way, I've decided to say Argentinian and Brazilian instead of Spanish and Portuguese. I don't know what I should technically be saying, but I know that translators will basically only work with either Brazilian Portuguese or Portuguese Portuguese and Argentinian Spanish as opposed to Spanish Spanish. I think it gives you a little bit more detail about the book, even if it is technically incorrect. Who cares about technical? Lena has dreamt for years of leaving her tiny village in the drought-stricken region. Her son left long ago to find work and a better fortune. Relicaro, her husband, is content to stay put on his ancestors' land, tending to their graves. Ignoring Relicaro's plea, a desperate Lena decides to abandon their home in search of her son, work and water. She starts her journey on foot, and Relicaro eventually follows behind, bringing a donkey and a sack with his ancestors' bones. Both witness unspeakable violence, cruelty and folly, but the hopes of reuniting their family keep them alive. Poetically charged, restrained and delicately condensed, this is a suspenseful ancestral tale in a long Latin American history of rural displacement and perpetual inequality. Little Movements by Lauren Morrow. A sparkling debut novel about a woman who must figure out whether being creatively fulfilled is compatible with being happily married, and what it means to be a black artist in one of the whitest parts of America. 30-something Leia Smart was raised by her single mother to dream medium, but all Leia ever wanted was a career in dance, which required dreaming big. So when she received the offer to be the choreographer in residence at Briar House in rural Vermont, she temporarily leaves behind Brooklyn, her job, her friends, and her husband to pursue it. Leia has 9 months to navigate a complex institution and teach a career-defining dance to a group of black dancers in a very small, very white town. She has help from a handsome composer, a neurotic costume designer, a witty communication director, and the austere program director, who can only compare Leia to black choreographers. It's an enormous feat, and that is before Leia's marriage buckles under the strain of distance, before Briar House's problematic past comes to life, and before Leia finds out she's pregnant. You knew she was pregnant when they said 9 months, didn't you? Little Movement is a poignant and insightful novel that explores issue of race, class, art, and ambition. It is a novel about self-discovery, the pressures placed on certain bodies, and never giving up on your dream. On the 18th of September comes What We Can Know by Ian McEwan. 2014. A great poem is read aloud and never heard again. For generations, people speculate about its message, but no copies have yet been found. 2119. The lowlands of the UK have been submerged by rising seas. Those who survive are haunted by the richness of the world that has been lost. Tom Metcalfe is an academic at the University of the South Downs, part of Britain's remaining island archipelago, and he pores over the archives of that distant era, captivated by the freedom and possibilities of human life at its zenith. When he stumbles across a clue that may lead to the lost poem, a story is revealed of entangled love and a crime that destroys his assumptions about the people he thought he knew intimately well. On the 23rd of September comes Will There Ever Be Another You by Patricia Lockwood. Amid a global pandemic, one young woman is trying to keep the pieces together of her family stunned by a devastating loss, and of her mind left mangled and misfiring from a mystifying disease. She's afraid of her floorboards, and she's heard, "What is love? "Baby, don't hurt me," playing on repeat in her head. She hates her friends, or more accurately, she doesn't know who they are. Has the illness stolen her mind and given her a new one? Does it mean she'll get to start over, a chance afforded to few people? The very weaves of herself seem to have loosened as time and memories pass straight through her body. "I'm sorry not to have responded to your email," she writes, "but I live completely in the present now. Will there ever be another you?" Is the brain-shredding, photophorescent story of one woman's disillusion and her attempt to create a new way of thinking, as well as the profound investigation into what keeps us alive in times of unprecedented disorientation and loss. The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Karen Desai. In the snowy mountains of Vermont, Sonia is lonely. A college student and aspiring writer, homesick for India, she turns to an older artist for inspiration and intimacy, a man who will cast a dark spell on the next years of her life. In Brooklyn, Sunny is lonely too, a struggling journalist originally from Delhi. He is both beguiled and perplexed by his American girlfriend and the country in which he plans to find his future. As Sonia and Sunny each becomes more and more alienated, they begin to question their understanding of happiness, human connection, and where they belong. Back in India, Sonia and Sunny extended families cannot fathom how anyone could be so lonely in this great bustling world. They arrange a meeting between the two, a clumsy meddling that only drives Sonia and Sunny apart before they have a chance to fall in love. The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny is the sweeping tale of two young people navigating the many forces that shape their country, class, race, history, and the complicated bond that inks one generation to the next. A love story, a family saga, and a rich novel of ideas. It is the most ambitious and accomplished work yet by one of our greatest novelists. Booker Prize winner with a new book she is, but I didn't think much of her Booker Prize winning book. On the 25th of September comes Cursed Daughters by Oyukan Braithwaite. No man will call your house his home, and if they try, they will not have peace. So goes the family curse, long handed down from generation to generation, ruining families and breaking hearts. And now it's Anai's turn, who, due to her uncanny resemblance to her dead auntie Monifi, is already used to her family's strange beliefs, as well as their insistence that she is a reincarnation. Still, when she falls in love with this handsome boy she saved from drowning, she can no longer run from her family's history. Is she destined to live out the habitual story of love and heartbreak, or can she escape the family curse and the mysterious fate that befell her aunt? Soon Come by Cuba Shand Baptiste. London, in one tiny Caribbean restaurant. Three friends try to build a future in a country that refuses to see them. Judith came to Britain to work and build a life, believing that hard work and respectability would keep her safe. Now a nurse, she keeps her head down and sends money home, quietly hoping her sacrifices will mean something. Mikey is angry, restless and unafraid to speak truth to power, whether through protest or pain. And Frank's just trying to find joy whenever he can, even if the world around him is falling apart. Their worlds collide in a small Caribbean restaurant in South London, where the smell of Scotch bonnets drift out the window and life-altering decisions are made between shifts and shared meals. Decades later, a new generation finds its way back to the same place. As the city changes around them, what remains is community, memory, and the pulse of something unbreakable. On the 30th of September comes Pick a Colour. I am not attempting to announce this author's name. I get a lot of names wrong when I do these videos, and sometimes you just got to accept that we're not getting this one right. Ning is a retired boxer, but to the customers who visit her nail salon, she is just another worker named Susan. On this summer's day, much like any other, The Susans buff and clip and polish and tweeze. They listen and smile and nod, but beneath this superficial veneer, Ning is a woman of rigorous intelligence and profound complexity, a woman enthralled by the intricacies and rhythms of her work, but also haunted by memories of pasts not taken and opportunities lost. A woman navigating the complex power dynamics among her fellow Susans, whose greatest fears and desires lie just beneath the gossip they exchange. As the day's work grinds on, the friction between Ning's two identities, an anonymous manicurist and brilliant observer of her own circumstances, will gather electric and crackling forces and at last demand a reckoning with the way the world of privilege looks at a woman like Ning, told over a single day with razor-sharp precision and wit. We're about 2/3 of the way through this video, so I'd like to take a moment to thank all my wonderful patrons for their support. They are all wonderful people, and if you would like to be a wonderful person too, why not sign up? It costs approximately the same amount of tax a multinational company pays in Australia. That's right, whatever you feel like at the time, but definitely less than 1% of your yearly salary. On the 9th of October comes Heap Earth Upon It by Chloe Michelle Howarth. January 1965, the orphaned O'Leary siblings Tom, Jack, Anna and Peggy arrive in the valley of Ballycree, tight-lipped about their troubled past and desperate for a fresh start. After being met with suspicion from most of the locals, the family are thrilled when they're taken under the wing of their well-respected neighbours Bill and Betty Nevin, who offer them work, companionship and the opportunity to fit in. But for one of the O'Learys, the new friendship sparks an intense attachment that makes the dynamic dangerous for all. It's difficult to bury secrets, but almost impossible to bury feelings. Crackling with suspense, Heap Earth Upon It revisits the rural island of Howarth's critically acclaimed debut and delves into the claustrophobic relationship and tangled identities, leaving you wondering who to trust until the very last page. I thought Sunburn was just a great read. One of my favourite reads of the year a couple of years ago when I read it. And I will read anything Chloe Michelle Howarth wants to write. Big Kiss Bye Bye by Claire Louise Bennett. Things that hold life in place have been lifted off and put away, uprooted by circumstances from cities to deep countrysides. A woman lives in temporary limbo, visited by memories of all she's left behind. The most insistent are those of Xavier, who has always been certain he knows her better than she knows herself. Xavier, whom she still loves but no longer desires, a displacement he has been unable to accept. An unexpected letter from an old acquaintance brings back a torrent from others she loved or wanted. Each has been a match and a mismatch, a liberation and a threat to her very sense of self. The ephemera left by their passage, a spilled coffee, an unwanted boutique, a mind-blowing kiss, makes up a cabinet of curiosities she's inventoried, trying to divine the essence of intimacy. What does it mean to connect with another person? What implies us to touch somebody, to be touched by them, to stay in touch? How do we let go? In yet another tour de force of fiction, Claire Louise Bennett explores the mysteries of how people come into and go out of our lives, leaving us forever in their grasp. On the 14th of October comes Bog Queen by Anna North, the story of an anthropologist's monumental discovery and the clash of civilizations it sent off over the fate of a land that holds us. When a body is found in a bog in northwest England, Agnes, an American forensic anthropologist, is called to investigate, but this body is not like any that she has ever seen. Although its bones prove that it was buried more than 2,000 years ago, it is almost completely preserved. Soon Agnes is drawn into the mystery from the distant past, called to understand and avenge the death of an Iron Age woman more like her than she knows. Along the way, she must contend with peat cutters who want to profit from the bog and activists who demand that the land be left undisturbed. Then there is the moss itself, a complex repository of artifacts and remains, with its own dark stories to tell. As Agnes faces the deep history of what she has unearthed, she is also forced to question what she thought she knew about her talents, her self-reliance, and her place in the world. Flashing between the uncertainties of a post-Brexit England and the Druidic order of Celtic Europe at the dawn of the Roman era, Bog Queen brims with contemporary urgency and ancient wisdom as it connects two young women learning to harness their strange strength in a mysterious and complex landscape. Doesn't that sound good? Intemperance by Sonora Ja. In the follow-up to the critically acclaimed The Laughter, a middle-aged woman starts a firestorm when she holds a contest based on an ancient Indian ritual in which men must compete to win her affection. A woman who has left two husbands announced she will celebrate her 55th birthday by holding a Swaymarev, drawn from an ancient custom in her Indian culture. This is an event in which suitors line up to compete in a feat of will and strength to win a beautiful princess's hand in marriage. The woman, a renowned and respected intellectual in an American town who had once declared that she was past such petty matters of love, knows she is now setting herself up for widespread societal ridicule, but her self-esteem and sexual libido are off the charts even as her body withers from disabilities, fading beauty, and an appetite for cake. To her surprise, a cast of characters show up to support her calls: a wedding planner looking for the next big enchanting thing, a disabilities rights activist making a documentary film, and even begrudgingly her own young adult son. The men rights activist movement protest her project, angry at her objectification of men. She is waylaid by visitations from goddess and priestesses past, who either try to slap sense into her or cheer her on. She must also reckon with brutal love stories in her ancestry that was endangered by the caste system, a story that placed a generational curse on those in a family who show an intemperate spirit. As her whole plan spirals into a spectacle, the woman embarks on a journey to decide what feat her suitor must perform to be worthy of her wrinkling hand. What feat will define a newer, better masculinity? What feat will it take to trust in the tenderness of love? Intemperance is a satirical feminist folk tale and a meditation on how we might reach past all sense and still find love. That sounds like a really enjoyable mess of a novel. Minor Black Figures by Brendan Taylor. A newcomer to New York, Reith is a black painter who grew up in the South and is trying to find his place in a contemporary Manhattan art scene. Galleries display bad art, pretentious artists jockeying for attention, the gossip and the backstabbing, while his part-time work for an art restorer is engaging. Rice suffers from an artistic block with his painting, and he is finding it increasingly difficult to spark his creativity. When he meets Keating, a white man who left the priesthood, Reith begins to reconsider how to observe the world. In the process of facing questions about the conflict between black and white art, the white gaze on the black body, and the compromise we make in art and in life. On the 23rd of October comes Our Precious War by Perrine Trippier, translated from French by Alison Anderson. Isadora, now an old woman relegated to an hospice, looks back on her life and how intimately entwined it was with that big sprawling house where she spent almost her entire existence. Her memories of childhood and beyond come back to her, seasoned from the games and warmth of summer and the back-to-school days of autumn to the crisp cold days of winter, days of loneliness and depth and to the spring's promise of renewal, and to the return to the house that meant so much to her. Told in lyrical, beguiling language, Isadora guides the readers through the maze of her memories by classifying, like a watercolourist, her recollections by season. On the 28th of October comes The Devil is a Southpaw by Brandon Hobson. Milton has envied Matthew, a talented young Cherokee artist, ever since they were locked up together in a dangerous juvenile detention centre in the late 1980s, until Matthew escaped, that is. A novel within a novel. We read here Milton's account of the story of their childhood, even as years later he remains jealous of Matthew's extraordinary abilities and unlikely success. Milton reveals secrets about their friendship, their families, and their nightmarish, sometimes surreal experience of imprisonment. In Revisiting the Past, he explores the echoing traumas of racial and institutional violence and the systemic injustice in our systems of incarnation and so-called reform. Wreck by Catherine Newman. The acclaimed best-selling author of Sandwich is back with a wonderful novel full of laughter and heart about marriage, family, and what happens when life doesn't go as planned. If you loved Rocky and her family on vacation on Cape Cod, wait until you join them at home 2 years later. And if this is your first meeting with the crew, get ready to laugh and cry and relate. Rocky, still anxious, nostalgic and funny, is living in Western Massachusetts with her husband Nick and their daughter Willa, who is back home after college. Their son Jamie has taken a new job in New York, and Mott, Rocky's widow father, has moved in. It all couldn't be more ridiculously normal until Rocky finds herself obsessed with a local accident that only tangentially affects them, with a medical condition that she hopes won't affect them at all. With her signature wit and wisdom, Catherine Newman explores the hidden rules of family, the heavy weight of uncertainty, and the gnarly fact that people, no matter how much you love them, are not exactly who you want them to be. Catherine Newman always includes menopausal women as the protagonist of her novels, and they often make very interesting characters. The 4th of November sees Palaver by Brian Washington be released, a life-affirming novel of family mending and how we learn to love from the award-winning Brian Washington. In Tokyo, the son works as an English tutor, drinking his night away with friends at a gay bar. He's entangled in a sexual relationship with a married man, and while he has built a chosen family in Japan, he is estranged from his family in Houston, particularly his mother, whose preference for the son's oft-troubled homophobic brother Chris pushes him to leave home. Then, in the weeks leading up to Christmas, 10 years since they've last seen each other, the mother arrives uninvited on his doorstep, separated only by the son's cat. The two of them bristle against each other immediately. The mother wrestles with memories of her youth in Jamaica and her often complicated brother, works to reconcile her good intentions with her missteps. The son struggles to forgive, but as life begins to steer them in unexpected directions, the mother has a tentative friendship with a local bistro owner, and the son is cautiously getting to know new patrons of the local bar. The two of them begin to see each other more clearly, sharing meals and conversations, and an evening trip to Nara. Both mother and son try as best they can to define where home really is, and whether they can find it even in each other. Queen Esther by John Irving. After 40 years, John Irving returns to the world of his best-selling classic novel, The Cider House Rules, revisiting the orphanage in St. Cloud's, Maine, where Dr. Wilbur Larch takes in Esther, a Viennese-born Jew whose life is shaped by anti-Semitism. Esther Narch is born in Vienna in 1905. Her father dies on board the ship to Portland, Maine. Her mother is murdered by anti-Semites in Portland. Dr. Larch knows it won't be easy to find a Jewish family to adopt Esther. In fact, he won't find any family who'll adopt her. When Esther is 14, soon to be a ward of the state, Larch meets the Winslows, a philanthropic New England family with a history for providing foster care for unadopted orphans. The Winslows aren't Jewish, but they despise anti-Semitism. Esther's gratitude for the Winslows is unending. Even as she retraces her roots back to Vienna, she never stopped loving and protecting the Winslows. In the final chapter set in Jerusalem in 1981, Esther North is 76. John Irving's 16 novel is a testament to his enduring ability to weave complex characters and intricate narratives that challenge and captivate. Esther was a really interesting character in the Cider House Rules, and that's just something that has to be read. John Irving is a living legend, and when he writes a sequel to one of his best novels, you kind of have to see what he's done. Son of the Morning by Akwaeke Emezi. A steamy paranormal romance set in the Black South. A bold new foray that takes us on a journey of magic and fantasy from the whispering creeks outside the city of salvation to the very depth of hell itself. Tender-hearted Gailey was raised by the Kincaids, a formidable clan of black women sequestered deep in the weeping willows and dark rustling creeks of their land. Gailey has always known that she was different, that there was an old, unknowable secret around her very existence. It has been a hollow ache inside her since her childhood, something she assumes she will always have to live with, until she meets Lucifer Hillel. He's fronting as the head of security for her wealthy friend's family, protecting a mysterious ancient artifact. But from the moment she lays eyes on him, Gailey knows he's not human. From her first incendiary touch, Lucifer knows something even Gailey doesn't know herself, that she isn't human either. Leviathan, as Lucifer's most trusted prince of hell, Levi is ruthless and determined to eliminate the intolerable danger that is Gailey before she brings death and disaster to those he loves. While unseen battles rage in hell, heaven and earth, Lucifer and Gailey's attraction threatens to bring all the structures of their existence crashing down around them. Soon loyalties will be shattered and reformed as Kincaid's secrets clash with the Prince of Hell, driving even the most powerful to their knees. Gailey Kincaid must decide if she will step into herself and embrace the consequences of power in this astonishing, seductive, and wildly original fantasy. Look, I wouldn't include a novel like this in new releases coming, but it is written by Akwaeke Emezi, and we give Akwaeke Emezi free pass to do whatever their weird creative mind wants to do, because we know that they're a very, very talented author who turns what sounds like absolute trash into treasure. But that all said, they've got a lot of work ahead of them to turn this into treasure. That's all I will say. Maybe this is for a new audience for Emezi. The 6th of November sees The Wax Child by Olga Ravn, translated from Danish by Martin Aitken. It was a black night in the year 1620 when Christens made the wax child. When she melted down beeswax and set it in the image of a small human, for days she carried it tucked beneath her arm, shaped in the warmth of her flesh, giving it life. She fashioned for it eyes and ears that cannot open, and yet it watches and listens. It looks on as Christiane is haunted by rumours. It hears what people whisper. It sees how, in the candlelight, she gazes with love at her friends, and hears the things they say in the shadows. It knows pine forests, misty forges, and the crackle of the burning pyre. It observes the violence in men's eyes and the cruelty of their law. In time it begins to understand that once a suspicion of witchcraft has taken hold, it can be impossible to shake. This novel is based on the infamous 17th century Danish witch trials. The School of Night by Karl Ove Nosgard, translated from Norwegian by Martin Aitkens. London, 1985. A city ripe with possibilities and desire. One young man who wants it all. Christian, newly arrived from the city, sees with ambition and contempt. His family in Norway never understood him. His fellow photography students bore him, but he knows he and his art are destined for more. Then he meets Hans, an eccentric Dutch artist. With Hans, the future Christian yearns for is tangible. All art is possible. Any line can be crossed. But success comes at a price. And when Christian does the unthinkable, will he be prepared to pay for it? Electrifying and unflinching, The School of Night is a singular novel about artistic creation and human corruption. It is the story of one terrible man's rise and fall, and a reckoning with the darkest parts of human nature. I've never read Nosgard before. I've always been a bit wary of him, probably completely unfairly too, but I don't get very good vibes of the hordes of zealous fanboys that he seems to attract. But also, he's really well respected and comes up in conversations when we talk about things like who might win the Nobel Prize. So it's probably worth giving him a shot and ignoring the zealous fanboys. On the 11th of November comes Carnival Fever by Juliana Ortiz Rayo, translated from Ecuadorian by Madeleine, alive, corporal and sensatory. Carnival Fever is a story told through the eyes of Anihoa, a young girl growing up in the Afro-descendant communities of Esmeraldas, Ecuador in the 1990s. Anihoa lives a protected life within the walls of her grandmother's house, surrounded by a gaggle of aunties who love, correct and teach her. As she narrates moments within them, with her mother and her father, Anihoa evokes the powerful presence of music and dance in her life, but especially at Carnival, as the expression of Afro-Ecuadorian culture, exploring hardship, migration, and the spectra of male violence, as well as the enormous cultural richness and resilience of a community of women. Coming on the 13th of November is The Ferryman and His Wife, by Frode Gutten, translated from Norwegian by Alison McCulloch. On this day in his life, Nils takes the boat out for the last time. In fact, he seems to be somewhere in between life and death already as he reunites with his old dog Luna. The passengers that come on and get off are all dead too. They are people he's transported through a long life as a ferryman, and they board the ferry just as they were when they knew them. Gradually he also gets Neil's own story, and above all the story of his marriage to a woman he loved very much. She too has been dead for several years, and as the ferryman himself is approaching the end of his own journey, his expectations grow. Will he be reunited with her too? I told Nell I wanted to read this because it sounds introspective and about coming to terms with mortality and the end of one's own life. And she said that's not true, that I wanted to read it because I was a fan of the music of Chris de Boer. Coming on the 18th of November is On the Calculations of Volumes Book 3 and 4. That's quite a cute release date, as November the 18th is the date in these novels that keep repeating themselves. This is a very literary Danish version of Groundhog Day that has been released in 7 volumes, and it's become a sensation in other countries, and it is slowly gaining some traction in the English-speaking world too. And lastly, on the 5th of May 2026, comes John of John by Douglas Stewart, a vivid, moving and beautifully crafted novel following a young man returning to his Hebridean island home, a portrait of a close-knit community and a fraying family, of a father's expectations and a son's desires. Now I'm sure we'll get a little bit more information on this as it gets closer to the release date, but when Douglas Stewart releases a new book, I think we should all be paying attention. Thank you for watching what I'm estimating is going to be at least an 80-minute video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye bye.